The commercial container ships back in the day, up until I'd say the mid, maybe late 80s, was a pretty good deal. Nowadays, those ships pull in a port, and no matter who you are, you're lucky to get ashore at all. I'm the Saipan Sailor, and this is part 3 of Career in a Can. Now, a lot of you might say, well, I went out there to make money. I didn't care about going ashore. Okay. But I bet you were a basket case by the time you got off that ship. Those ships also carried dry cargo, just about anything. And they also carried refrigerated containers. And the ship's electrician, his responsibility was to maintain those containers to get them from point A to point B, and keep their temperature where they're supposed to be, within a certain range. His job was also to plug the containers in when they came on board and to unplug them when they were ready to be discharged. I never cared for it. I just didn't like swinging around on those stacking frames. I mean, it just wasn't for me. And getting that call at 3 o'clock in the morning on a cold December, rainy, chill, nah, no thanks. But a lot of people loved it, and it made a lot of money, and my hat's off to them. A lot of good friends of mine have sailed as a refrigeration electrician, and they made a darn good living out of it. But me, I was more fit for the engine room. Now, Sealand had a lot of ships, and back in the 70s, I guess they sold a lot of them or junked them. And that company built the SL7 class vessels. And they did that, I think, in the middle or late 70s. Now, I never rode those ships, but I was told they were pretty darn good. And one of them, I don't know how many they built, but one of them actually broke the world record for the fastest Atlantic crossing. I don't know if it still holds that record, but it did break it. Those ships were twin screw. They had 2 propellers, 2 shafts, 2 engine rooms. They were steamships. So there were 4 people on watch in the engine room at all times. There was a second assistant engineer, a third assistant engineer, and 2 unlicensed watchstanders. Well, apparently they made a lot of money off those ships, and eventually sold them to the Military Sea Lift Command. Those ships are still active today. I mean, they're sitting there on a reduced status, but they're ready to go at a moment's notice. I was in school at the time, and I had never been to California. And a couple of guys in my class were from Los Angeles. And they were telling me about different types of ships they were on and different ports they went into in Asia, the Far East. and I was intrigued. So it wasn't long before I ended up registering at the hall in Wilmington, Los Angeles, California. And in 1983, actually it was 1982, Sealand, with the money they made from the SL7s, they had built what they called the D9’s. They were diesel ships, Sulzer diesels, 9-cylinder, and they also converted some of their steamships to D6. Well, a few of the D9’s were running out of the West Coast, and they were coming out this way to Asia. So I jumped on it, and I learned that engine room inside and out, and stand and watch was a breeze. I loved it. Nobody messed with me. Those ships went from Oakland, at the time, it was a 35-day trip. They went from Oakland to Yokohama, Japan, to Kobe, Japan. From Kobe, they would go to Kaohsiung, Taiwan, then to Hong Kong, and then back to Kaohsiung, then to Kobe again, Yokohama, and then to Long Beach, California, and then to Oakland. And we got a day off in both Long Beach and Oakland, which was really nice. One of those ships was the Sealand Defender. They had several of them, the Sealand Defender, the Patriot, the Endurance, the Innovator, the Developer, and I was on maybe 3 or 4 of those ships, 3 of them. The first one I sailed was the Sealand Defender, and we hit real stormy weather. And the lifeboat, which was right outside my room, had filled up with water. I guess those lifeboats have a small drain hole, so it doesn't drain very fast. And that thing filled up with water quick, broke free from the davit, and went forward. And as it went forward, it cut off the bottom corner of one of the containers. And that lifeboat was lost. It was gone. When the storm passed the next morning, what was in that container was all over the deck. There were button-down, long-sleeve collar shirts, cheap shirts made in China. They were checkered flannel. They looked flannel. They were all the same type of shirt, all the same color. And so there must have been, I don't know, a few dozen of them out there, you know. So they were passing them around. Another thing they found out on deck that was in that container, and we all laughed. I laughed because, you know, it's all about supply and demand, were these, how do I describe it? Little plastic battery operated vibrating devices. I won't say anything more. At the end of that trip, now back then, well, they paid off in Oakland, and the paymaster from the company would come on board, and also the shipping commissioner. Now the shipping commissioner doesn't exist anymore, but he would have to show up at payoffs to make sure everything went smoothly. And of course the union was there and everybody, you know, and they would pay off in the crew mess. So we're all standing in line out there, and as a joke, we are all wearing the same shirt. and paymaster, and they're looking at us, you know, wondering what the heck. That was pretty funny. Just one of the stories from one of those ships. And another ship I rode, D9, was a Sealand Developer. I made 10 consecutive 35-day trips on that ship, and I had the time of my life. I laughed at those day working guys because they never seen daylight. I mean, we pull in, for example, we would pull into Hong Kong. I was on the 8 to 12 watch. We pull into Hong Kong on my watch at nighttime. And I would go ashore at night, hit the clubs. Then I'd come back, get a few hours sleep, stand my watch in the morning, and then go back uptown and go shopping. And then come back and we would leave on my watch that night. These poor guys on day working, I mean, they were pulling pistons and cleaning them, and they were always doing something. They almost never got ashore. Me, I walked around with a clipboard. Hey, that's the job I chose. So if you do the math, I was actually on board that ship almost a year, 2 weeks short of a year, 11 and a half months. I would have stayed a lot longer, but the union, apparently without membership vote, had made a rule that seniority people cannot homestead ships anymore. Guys would get on ships and stay forever. There was one such ship, an old steamship. It was called the Sealand Mobile, and I'm sure there were other ones like this. That ship shuttled between Manila and Kaohsiung. That's all it did. Every weekend it was in port. And I heard guys would sign on that ship. It was a shuttle, so you would sign for an article, just like I did in Europe. And you could, if you were a seniority guy, you could stay on as long as you wanted. There were guys on there for 10, 15 years. Flat broke when they signed on, had kids in high school, either in Taiwan or in the Philippines, when they got off the ship. I heard when they laid that ship up, they laid her up, one of those guys had been on there so long that he just couldn't accept the fact that he had to get off the ship. And he locked himself in his room. They had to come down there with a master key, get him out of there, and haul him up to the captain's office to get paid. I can understand that in a way. You get attached to something and you have it so good, you can't let go. You can't let go. I'll never forget those ships. I had some of the best times of my life. And when I think of some more stories, I'll do that in my next segment. For now, sayonara, folks. I'm the Saipan Sailor, and this has been episode 3 of Career in a Can.